And finally, Section 5, M Theory and Beyond the Bang. Now, this is great. M Theory. Before I get into it, I have to talk about this. Nobody knows what the M actually stands for. The guy that named it, Edward Witten, is maybe just kind of playing with everyone, but he won't say what it means. Some people think it stands for the master theory or the magic theory. Maybe M is for membrane, which is part of what the theory is really all about. Anyway, let's talk about Witten and what he actually did. In the 1980s, there's this whole new theory that came out called string theory. The idea at the most fundamental level, instead of finding little particles, which is what people have envisioned for centuries, we would find essentially little strings, little one-dimensional strings. And the vibration of those strings is what we detect as different particles. So one particular quark, for example, and we're talking about the very smallest quote-unquote particles imaginable, the very fundamental particles, if the string vibrates one way, we perceive it as one type of quark. And if it vibrates another way, maybe we perceive that as an electron or another type of quark or whatever. Just like strings on a guitar have different frequencies and we hear them as different notes. So all these little strings are vibrating as different notes that we perceive as different particles. That's kind of the really basics of string theory, that at the smallest levels you have these strings. But the problem was, by the mid-1990s, there were 5 competing theories of string theory, and all of them actually seemed to be correct. This didn't make any sense. But in 1995, one of the most brilliant people alive today, Edward Witten, comes up with a more broad theory that encompasses all 5 of the string. He showed that all 5 theories are correct because they're all part of a broader theory that he called M theory. Now, this stuff gets way, way out there really fast because mathematically, for all of this to work, instead of dealing with space-time, the 3 dimensions of space and the 1 dimension of time that Einstein worked with, to get this to work for Witten, he had to have 11 dimensions. So 10 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time to get this to work. What does that mean? We don't know. Where are these sort of missing dimensions? We don't really know. They talk about them like they're just curled up in the corner somewhere. Anyway, I'm no expert on this, and it's way over my head. But essentially, to get this to work, now they talk about membranes or just branes. B-R-A-N-E-S, branes, and these are like 5-dimensional branes. And one of the big parts of this theory now is that these 5-dimensional branes may collide with each other. And every time they do, that's a new Big Bang, which leads to the idea that every time this happens, these collisions in other dimensions create new universes, that we don't live in just a single universe, but we live in what is now being called the multiverse. The multiverse. Now, anyway, like I said, feel free to read up on that. It's way beyond what I understand. Now, before we leave this chapter, I want to talk about Stephen Hawking a little bit and his mentor, his professor, Roger Penrose. If you get a chance, go see the movie The Theory of Everything. It's mostly about relationships between Hawking and his wife, but they get into a little bit of physics here and there. And Hawking, as a young man, right before he developed the motor neural disease, he was trying to find something to do his PhD on. He went to a lecture by Roger Penrose, and he started thinking about black holes. Now, let's think about a black hole for a minute. A black hole has, of course, a singularity point, this point of almost infinite density. And Hawking said, wait a second, a hot, dense point of almost infinite density, that sounds a lot like something else that I know. And he tied that in with the idea of the Big Bang, right? The Big Bang began at a point that's a singularity point, this super hot, dense, incredibly dense point. And he thought, well, maybe the two are tied together. And think about why this makes sense. Okay, in other words, yes, I am saying that our universe came from a black hole. Now, one reason this makes sense, how do you escape from a black hole? Well, you'd have to travel faster than light. And guess what happened during that period of inflation that I talked about in the last section? The universe at the very, very, very beginning expanded faster than light, as if it was escaping from a black hole. Our whole universe may have been created from the black hole of a different universe altogether. So to answer the question that I often get from students, what is inside a black hole? You. Yeah, all of us. Everything you look at. Maybe our whole universe came from a black hole. And then think about how crazy that gets, because our own universe, of course, has spawned many black holes. And if each of those black holes then is creating a new universe, that's another way that you end up with a multiverse. Okay, a multiverse. Our black hole, our universe is born from one black hole, but it generates a whole bunch of other universes as well. Yep, pretty crazy stuff. It's just the theory, but it's one that's fairly widely accepted by astronomers now. Thanks for listening.